Now we're going to take a look at the equal sign in Python. And the equal sign works this way in quite a few languages. So let's scroll up so we get a little more room to work here. And the equal sign is not quite what you think of when you think of an equal sign from algebra. It tells you that what's on the left side is equal to what's on the right side. And that's kind of what's happening, but it's actually a little bit different. So let's say that I want to keep track. You use variables to keep track of things. So I just type in age. I'm just making up a variable there, and I'm going to assign it a value, 21. Okay. What I've done here is I've used a single equal sign. That's called the assignment operator in Python and many other languages. And what it means is, it's kind of like an equal sign, but what it means is a little bit more than that. It means take this number and store it into, set aside a memory cell someplace in the memory of the computer and put a label on it called age. And take the number 1 and put it into that memory cell that has the label age on it. Okay, so there's an action that's taking place there. So we're assigning a value to the variable age, and that's why they call it an assignment statement. Now, if I type in age and hit enter, it comes back and tells me the number there that was stored there is 21. If I do this, and now that writes on top of the 21. The 21 is gone forever, and what I have now is 22. And whoops, did a little accidental scrolling there. Okay. So this age on the left side is called a variable because, we can put various things in it. Sometimes we can put a 21 in it, sometimes we can put a 22 in it, and the value of it can vary throughout the course of a program. The rules are that the variable must be on the left-hand side. I cannot say, I'm going to get an error message if I do that. Okay? It says you can't assign this to a literal. When they say a literal, they mean a constant, and this is the number 23. It's a constant, and you can't do that. But you can put a number into a variable. Okay? We have rules for variable names. The rules are pretty simple. Generally, begin it with a letter, a lowercase letter. You can follow it with digits, letters, or underscores. And it is case sensitive. If I want to know what's in the variable age, I just type age with a lowercase a and it tells me 22. But if I type age like this, it says, I don't know what you're talking about. You haven't referred to something called age yet with a capital A. So it is case sensitive. It can't be a reserved word. I can't do something like and equals 5. And it's not a good error message. It just says invalid syntax. I wish it'd say something a little better than that. But you can't use a reserved word as a variable. You'll know it's a reserved word because it'll turn purple, at least if you have the same settings on your editor that I do. So all of the reserved words will be the same color. Variables are going to be white. The length is basically unlimited. You can have very long variable names, but you probably should not. I mean, I could say this is a very long name equals 10, okay? And then if I want to see what's in this is a very long name again, I can type that whole long thing in again. If you want to have more than one word for a variable name, great, just put an underscore in between. In general, we're going to do everything in lowercase and with underscores separating words if the identifier is more than one word. So this is a variable name. It's also called an identifier, and it refers to a location in memory. Okay. Don't start them with a capital letter. It's not illegal, but we're saving that for something else. You can also start it with an underscore, but don't do that. That's kind of saved for something else as well. So if I want to have a number variable, like I did with age, all I do is put a number on the right-hand side. And if I want to have a name, I want a string, I can do it like that. If I want to have a variable called hours worked, whoops, don't make sure you spell them right, equals 40.5. You can do that. So in general, just if all you got to remember is start with a letter. You can have underscores and numbers after it if you want to. Generally, you're just going to do letters and underscores probably. The variable should be descriptive. Don't do something like, X, or like, let's say A for age equals 19, and equals Bob. And if I do A, it'll come back and say 19. If I do N, it'll come back and say Bob. But don't do that. Those names are not descriptive. Somebody reading this will have no idea what A stands for. You might remember it for a while, but you'll forget after a while, probably too. If you have a variable called age, a variable called name, a variable called hours worked, it makes your program much easier to understand. And you're going to be reading it, and other people will be reading it. At least in this class, I will be reading it, and I want to be able to understand what your program does. Okay. Let's try a few more things with strings. What if you want to have an apostrophe in a string? Like if you want apostrophe in, then your enclosing characters should be quotation marks like this, okay? If you want to say something like, he said, so you want apostrophes to be, quotation marks to be part of the string, then you have to put apostrophes around it, and that's a valid string. Now, on the other hand, what if you want to say, he said, don't do that? Well, that's got quotation marks and apostrophes, and the way you do that is you've got to start it with 3 quotation marks. This is a little weird. And then you're going to say, he said, and then apostrophes, or quotation marks and apostrophe. And at the end, now I could have gotten by without leaving a space here, but at the end, you can't have 4 quotation marks in a row. You do have to put a space in there. And don't worry about this. This backslash and apostrophe is a way that Python stores some special characters, and we're not going to really worry about that too much, at least for a while yet. Okay? Now, on the other hand, if I said sentence equals he said, I don't need that space there. He said, and then if I type sentence, I think if I type sentence, I'll still get the extra characters. Yeah, I get that backslash in there. But if I do a print statement, then it prints out correctly. Okay, so if we do put, apostrophes or quotation marks in the middle of a string like that, it may be stored like that by Python, but if we go to try to print it out, it will print out correctly. Okay, let's try a few more things here. Let's try something like this. Let's say I've got a variable called count, and I set it equal to 5. Okay. Now, if I type the word count, it'll come back and tell me it's 5. And if I do count plus 1, it'll evaluate that and come back and say that that is 6. Now, if I print count again, it did not change the value of count. Count is still 5. But if I want to change the value of count, I can do something like this. Count equals count plus 1. And this is where the algebra analogy kind of falls a little short. This would never work in algebra. You can't say something is equal to itself plus 1. So what's on this side and what's on this side are not equal. But what happens is assignment statements are evaluated from the right side first. So I'm going to add 1 to count. Count is 5. I'm going to add 1 to it and get 6. I'm going to put that value back in the variable count. Okay? So hit enter here. It doesn't print anything out. But if I print count now, it's going to tell me the value of count is 6. This is a very common thing to do. Take the existing value of a variable and add something onto it. And so the name of the variable appears on both sides of the equal sign. Because adding something onto a value is something that happens so often, there's a shortcut for that. Okay? And count was currently 6. This means add 1 to count and put it back in count. So you don't have to type the variable twice with this plus equals. So if I do count now, it should tell me the count is now 7. Okay? So we can do some other things here. We can make this a little more complicated. Let's say I've got a variable called pay rate. Okay, that's a floating point number. It's got a decimal point in it. So $10 an hour. And I've got a variable called hours equals 40. And then I can do something like this. Pay equals hours times pay rate. And hit enter. And so pay should be 400. If I type pay and hit enter, it tells me it's 400. Notice it put a decimal point in there because if I multiply a number with a fraction in it by a whole number, the result could have a fraction in it, even though in this case the fractional part is 0. If there's a floating point number in there somewhere, the result is going to be floating point. I could have a real long expression here with 10 integers and then one floating point number tacked onto the end of the expression, and it's still going to be a floating point result. All you need to have is one floating point number in an expression to make the whole thing floating point. Okay, let's stop there.